He waited, quietly. No complaints, no outburst, just patience and professionalism. But when the boardroom doors opened and they saw who he really was, everything changed. This isn't just about disrespect, it's about what happens when quiet power walks into the room. Stay with us because what happened next left an entire bank scrambling. The glass doors of Horizon West Bank opened with a silent whoosh as Malcolm Reed stepped inside. The air was crisp and cool, infused with the sterile aroma of leather polish, fresh brewed coffee, and quiet money. Malcolm adjusted the cuffs of his blazer, custom-tailored midnight blue, and stepped with intention onto the marble floor. At 49, the retired Air Force logistics officer had seen more than his share of bureaucracy in boardrooms. Now the CEO of Pinnacle Haulage Group, he was here to open the commercial account that would support his company's rapid expansion. He wasn't here for favors. He was here with contracts, capital, and proof of growth, the kind of account banks fought over or should have. At the reception desk sat Brianna Tate, late 20s, clipboard in hand, posture straight but energy flat. "Morning," Malcolm said with a calm nod. "Appointment at 10:30 with Tracy Monroe." She glanced at her monitor. "You're on the schedule. Please take a seat. She'll be with you shortly." No smile, no engagement. Malcolm took his seat near the sunlit windows. His briefcase at his side, posture relaxed. He'd come prepared. What he didn't know yet was how prepared he'd need to be. 10:30 came and went, then 10:45. At first, Malcolm paid it no mind. He'd run businesses, led missions, waited in war zones. This was nothing. But then came the signs, unmistakable, undeniable. A young man in a gray suit strolled in, checked in. 5 minutes later, a banker appeared and led him inside the executive suite. Next came a woman in designer sunglasses and heels, not even bothering to check in. She laughed with Brianna, the receptionist, who waved her straight through the frosted doors. No appointment necessary, apparently. Malcolm checked his watch. 11:07. His eyes drifted across the lobby. Every leather chair, every golden fixture, every smug nod between insiders reminded him of something. That quiet arrogance, the kind that assumes you don't belong unless you prove otherwise. At 11:20, Malcolm stood, calmly walked to the desk. "Is Ms. Monroe aware I'm here?" Brianna barely looked up. "She's aware. She's just finishing with another client. Do you know when she might be available?" A shrug. "Shouldn't be much longer." Malcolm's jaw flexed. Not anger, calculation. He'd seen this game before, and this time, he wasn't going to fold. The minutes crawled by. Malcolm returned to his seat, eyes scanning every interaction. Laughter, warm handshakes. Names exchanged like currency. He wasn't imagining it. There was a flow to who got seen and who got sidelined. 11:45, over an hour since his scheduled appointment. Then came the final signal. Karen Ellsworth, the branch manager, emerged from the hallway holding a baby in her arms and chatting warmly with a woman in a sundress, Melanie. "Little Ava's gotten so big she cooed." Melanie beamed. "No appointment, just stopping by." Malcolm blinked once. That was it. He stood crisp and cool and approached Brianna one last time. "Just to confirm, I'm Malcolm Reed. I had a 10:30 with Miss Monroe." Brianna stiffened. "Yes, I believe she's just wrapping up." He didn't nod, didn't thank her. Just walked back to his seat, crossed his legs, and checked his emails. From the outside, he looked unbothered. On the inside, every second was a mental tally. He wasn't just waiting anymore. He was watching, logging, preparing. When the truth came to light, and he wanted it timed down to the minute. 12:03 p.m. The glass doors opened again. In walked Mrs. Pendleton, older white, draped in a navy blue wrap dress, carrying a Hermes bag that probably cost more than a junior analyst's salary. As soon as she entered, Brianna straightened her voice, brightening into something melodic. "Good morning, Mrs. Pendleton. Lovely to see you. No ID check. No appointment." A banker appeared instantly, escorting her through the doors Malcolm had been watching for over 90 minutes. He uncrossed his legs, smoothed the front of his blazer, and stood. But this time he didn't walk to the desk. He walked straight to the frosted doors. "Sir, excuse me?" Brianna called, rising partway from her seat. Malcolm didn't break stride. He moved down the hallway with quiet authority, passing closed doors, framed accolades, and muffled voices. Then he saw her, Tracy Monroe, blonde, late 40s, tapping away on her laptop. Alone, she looked up sharply. "Mr. Reed, you were supposed to wait." "I did," Malcolm replied evenly. Silence thickened. She gestured to a chair with tight annoyance. "Have a seat." He did not, because she offered, but because he chose to. This wasn't about the account anymore. It was about the pattern, and Malcolm was ready to break it. Tracy shuffled papers, trying to reclaim control. Apologies for the delay, she said, her voice clipped. It's been a chaotic morning. Malcolm met her gaze. Has it? He asked, calm and cool. I watched 6 walk-ins get priority, some without appointments. There must have been a miscommunication. Malcolm finished, for her tone even. Of course, Tracy opened a folder and began reviewing his documents. Your proposal is strong, she said, but in this lending environment, we're cautious. We'd need additional assurances. But before she could continue, the door behind Malcolm opened, and the air changed. 3 individuals entered, commanding the room with their presence, sharp suits, polished shoes, and reputations that preceded them. At the center was Cassandra Holt, regional chair of Granite Financial Group. Her eyes swept the room, then landed on Malcolm. Malcolm, she said, a smile blooming. What on earth are you doing here? Tracy froze. Malcolm rose slowly, extending his hand. Just came to handle business, he said. Cassandra laughed. At this branch. She turned to Tracy. Do you have any idea who you've kept waiting? Tracy's face went pale. Her eyes darted between them, panic blooming where smugness had lived. And Malcolm just smiled. Cassandra Holt wasn't just an executive. She was a force. As the senior regional chair of Granite Financial Group, she outranked everyone in that branch, including Tracy Monroe. Her reputation was sharp-edged and unapologetic. A woman who demanded results and dismantled excuses. She turned back to Malcolm with genuine warmth. You're not here to open a personal account, are you? No, Malcolm said with a measured smile. This was supposed to be the onboarding for Pinnacle Haulage Group. Cassandra raised an eyebrow. You had an appointment, 10:30 a.m. Cassandra checked her watch. It was nearing 12:15. The smile disappeared. She turned to the 2 men flanking her. This is Malcolm Reed, she said. One of our newest strategic growth partners. His company just cleared its second quarter. 22% over projection. Both men. Gerald Lynn, VP of Compliance, and Eli Vasquez, Director of Strategy, nodded in recognition. Impressive work, Eli said. We reviewed your logistics proposal last month. You've got clean scaling, tight margins. Tracy opened her mouth, perhaps to defend herself, but Cassandra cut her off. Who was helping him today? Tracy's voice cracked. I didn't realize, no, Cassandra said sharply. You didn't bother to realize. Tracy's shoulders stiffened. It's just been an unusually busy morning. Cassandra cut her off mid-sentence. No busier than the 5 branches I visited this week. None of them had this problem. The room fell into a stillness so sharp it felt like it could cut glass. Brianna at the front desk had stopped typing. The security guard by the elevator shifted awkwardly, staring at a non-existent smudge on the wall. You had his name, Cassandra said. You had his file. You looked at him and decided without saying a word that he wasn't worth your time. I didn't mean... Stop. Don't lie to me. It's insulting. Tracy's lips parted, but she stayed silent. Cassandra turned to Malcolm. You've got every right to be furious. I'm not here to be furious, Malcolm said calmly. I'm here to handle business. Cassandra's eyes flickered with something that looked like admiration. She turned to Eli. Get his account processed personally. Treasury services, commercial, onboarding, credit lines. I want the full suite today, Gerald added. Let's audit the branch Q logs too. As Tracy fidgeted with her papers, Cassandra pointed to the open area near the windows. Tracy, sit there in the lobby, Tracy asked, horrified, in the same chair he waited in. Now, the quiet gasp that rippled through the lobby was almost theatrical. Tracy Monroe, longtime manager once feared and fawned over, was now being told to sit in public view, right where Malcolm had waited for nearly 2 hours, ignored. The authority in Cassandra Holt's voice allowed no room for interpretation. Tracy looked between Cassandra and the executives as if hoping someone might step in. No one did. Cassandra's tone sharpened. Now, Tracy. With stiff movements, Tracy left her office and sank into the lobby chair. Her posture was forced, like someone unused to being on display, especially not in humiliation. Malcolm stood silent, watching it all unfold, not out of vengeance, but from a place of quiet principle. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't stormed out. He didn't need to. Cassandra led him to a glass-walled conference room. Gerald and Eli followed. As the door shut behind them, Amanda remained at her desk, pale hands frozen above the keyboard. Eli turned to her. Print the last 2 hours of logged appointments. Yes, sir, Amanda whispered. Inside the room, Malcolm laid his folder on the table. Cassandra smiled. Let's get to work, Mr. Reed. And don't worry, this won't happen again. Outside the glass, Tracy sat exposed and very, very quiet. Inside the conference room, it was a different world. efficiency, clarity, and respect. Gerald Lynn reviewed Malcolm's business documents with speed and expertise. Corporate structures airtight, he murmured. Vendor contracts, verified strong legal base. No red flags. Eli Vasquez scanned the financials. Growth is impressive. Year-over-year margin discipline is rare in this sector. Cassandra Holt nodded as she flipped through the partnership plans. You didn't just show up prepared, you showed up ready to lead. Malcolm gave a small, appreciative nod. I didn't build Pinnacle Haulage to compete, I built it to dominate, Cassandra smiled. Then we'll make sure Horizon West Bank doesn't slow you down again. She reached into her sleek briefcase and pulled out a black folder, the company's seal embossed in gold. This is your formal acceptance into our preferred growth partner track. Early access to funding, priority underwriting, and a dedicated team. You've earned it, Malcolm raised an eyebrow. Didn't expect all this. Cassandra's gaze softened. You didn't ask for it. That's what makes you different. They spent 10 more minutes finishing paperwork. Treasury services, credit line approvals, high-level onboarding. Then Cassandra stood, opened the door, and led Malcolm out, and Tracy. She was still in the lobby chair. Waiting, the sight of Tracy Monroe seated awkwardly in the waiting area sent a quiet wave of whispers through the bank. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in 20 minutes. Hands clenched, jaw tight, eyes locked on a random spot on the floor. Cassandra Holt stepped into the open space and spoke not with volume but with finality. Tracy, do you remember the diversity training you signed off on last quarter? Tracy nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Yes, of course. Then you'll understand why we're filing a formal internal review. Your conduct this morning wasn't just unprofessional, it was discriminatory, and it will be documented. Tracy's voice cracked. I didn't mean to offend anyone. No, Cassandra said. That's the problem. You didn't mean to think. Every employee, every customer in earshot froze. As Cassandra turned to Malcolm, her tone warmed again. You ready? Malcolm nodded. Let's go. He didn't even look at Tracy as he passed her. Not because he didn't notice her, but because she no longer mattered. At the front desk, he paused, Amanda. The receptionist met his gaze nervously. He leaned in slightly. Next time someone like me walks in, see them. Don't wait until someone else has to show you why. As Malcolm Reed stepped into the sunlight outside Horizon West Bank, the warmth hit his shoulders like a quiet exhale. No audience, no applause, just the hum of city traffic and a sense of clarity that had been earned, not gifted. Beside him, Cassandra Holt paused at her car, a sleek black Lexus that glinted beneath the afternoon sun. You handled that better than most, she said. Better than I would have if I'm honest. Malcolm offered a quiet chuckle. I've had practice. You ever think about going public with stories like this? People need to hear them. I'm not in it to shame anyone, Malcolm replied. I just want the system to get better. For the next person who walks in wearing the wrong expectations. Cassandra's expression softened. You're one of the few who get it. Power isn't about position, it's about presence. And today your presence changed the culture of that branch. Malcolm didn't gloat, he didn't have to. As Cassandra drove off, he stood by his truck for a moment, letting the moment settle. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't demanded a thing, but he had made everyone listen, and most importantly, they'd remember. Inside the bank, the fallout had already begun. Gerald Lynn and Eli Vasquez stayed behind. Eli went room by room, pulling appointment records, gathering statements, and noting behavior patterns. Gerald quietly deactivated Tracy Monroe's internal access and notified HR. By 2 p.m., Tracy was escorted to a back office for questioning, not out of punishment alone, but because the company had long promised equity. And today those words were being put to the test. Amanda. The receptionist hadn't spoken since Malcolm left. Her hands trembled as she printed records. She'd seen everything, every smile for the right client, every blank stare for the others. But this time she knew silence wouldn't protect her. She began drafting a memo, an honest one about what she'd witnessed. It was her first real act of courage at the job, and the bank itself, it suddenly didn't feel quite so invincible anymore. Because one man armed only with professionalism and patience had exposed what polished walls and executive titles couldn't hide. Not with rage, but with truth. Meanwhile, Malcolm's phone buzzed. It was an email from Evan Kwan, his operations manager back at Pinnacle Haulage Group. Subject, new contract approved. Midwest Division. Malcolm smiled faintly, not out of pride, but affirmation. While others had been trying to minimize him, his business had kept moving forward. That was the lesson he'd carried from the military and into every boardroom since. Let your work speak louder than any insult. He pulled out of the bank's parking lot with smooth confidence. Behind him, the building gleamed in the rearview mirror, pristine on the outside, but with undeniable cracks now exposed on the inside. He didn't need to get even. The system had revealed itself. What mattered now was what came next. Malcolm had other meetings to get to, more contracts to sign, and people waiting on him, people who respected his leadership, not just his resume. The damage done inside that bank wasn't permanent, but it was visible now. And visibility forces accountability. Malcolm wasn't interested in burning bridges. He was building better roads. 3 days later, Cassandra Holt stood in a boardroom lined with panoramic windows delivering a presentation titled The Cost of Quiet Bias. At the center of the slide deck was a scenario anonymized, but everyone in the room knew exactly who and what it was about. Imagine losing a seven-figure client, she said calmly, not because of interest rates or risk models, but because someone made assumptions in the lobby. Heads nodded. No one argued. Now imagine the same client walking out with a partnership, just not with the person who ignored him. Cassandra clicked to the next slide, a side-by-side chart of reputation loss versus procedural integrity. She didn't name Tracy Monroe, but her absence was its own statement. Her position had been suspended, pending full review. HR had already received complaints from other branches, but this presentation wasn't about punishment. It was about evolution. We don't need better optics, Cassandra concluded. We need better vision. Silence followed, then slow, deliberate applause. It wasn't a standing ovation. It was a reckoning. Back at Pinnacle Haulage, Malcolm sat at his desk reviewing expansion projections, logistics, maps, fleet allocations, vendor contracts, all organized, all advancing. He paused, reflecting on that day at the bank, not with bitterness, but clarity. He didn't dwell on Tracy Monroe's face when confronted, or Breonna Tate's silence, or the fact that Mrs. Pendleton would probably never know she'd played a role in a quiet turning point. What Malcolm remembered most was the chair, that uncomfortable leather seat near the window where he sat for 90 minutes while people walked by as if he didn't exist. That chair taught him more than most conversations ever had. That power doesn't always come from volume. Sometimes it's found in stillness, in endurance, in being the one who doesn't flinch. His phone buzzed again, another contract closed. Malcolm stood stretched and looked out the window of his own office, high above the industrial lot where his trucks came and went. They tried to make him small. Instead, they reminded him how big his presence truly was. And the next time someone like him walks into a bank, they'll think twice before telling him to wait. Tracy Monroe sat in a sterile HR conference room 2 weeks later. Her blazer wrinkled, palms damp, a manila folder of complaints stacked beside her. Across the table, an internal review officer asked calmly, "Do you remember the moment Mr. Reed walked in that morning?" She nodded, yes. "What made you delay his appointment?" Tracy opened her mouth, but nothing coherent came out. Because the truth was simple and damning. She didn't think he belonged, not in that chair, not in that space. She hadn't recognized his value because she never stopped to consider he had any. Now she sat on the other side of the judgment, her career dangling on a thread that once felt unbreakable. Meanwhile, Amanda, the receptionist, had submitted a signed affidavit detailing patterns of behavior, dismissive tendencies toward clients of color, casual prioritization of certain preferred guests, and, most damning, her own discomfort. Remaining silent, the system was correcting itself, not with a hammer, but with facts, and Tracy, once untouchable, was now a case study. The price of ignoring someone wasn't just bad service. It was the beginning of a fall. In the days that followed, Horizon West Bank initiated its first ever walk-through accountability review. Executives were instructed to visit every branch as anonymous observers, posing as clients, noting behaviors, and quietly assessing integrity. This wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about culture, and Malcolm Reed's quiet protest had triggered it. At Pinnacle Haulage, Malcolm didn't bask in the aftermath. He was too focused on forward motion, on scaling the Northeast Corridor, renegotiating vendor rates, and mentoring 2 interns from underrepresented backgrounds. When Cassandra Holt sent him a thank you note, handwritten embossed seal, he smiled. Not because it flattered him, but because it reminded him that real leadership shows up in 2 places: during adversity and after the applause fades. Malcolm didn't need headlines. He had results. And the ones who once overlooked him, they were now studying him. A month later, Breonna Tate requested a transfer. Not out of shame, but renewal. Watching what happened to Tracy and hearing Amanda's confession had shaken something loose inside her. She'd played neutral too long, watched with silent complicity as biases passed like background noise. Now she wanted to learn. She applied for a role in Horizon West's newly created Client Equity Initiative, a program designed to train frontline employees to identify unconscious bias, challenge assumptions, and elevate professional empathy. Malcolm's story was now part of the training slides, not by name but by example. Sometimes the final line of the presentation read, "The person sitting quietly in the lobby isn't waiting for permission. They're waiting to be seen." And if you miss them, you miss more than a customer. You miss the moment to grow. And people listened because growth had a face now. And that face looked a lot like Malcolm Reed. Malcolm never told his story online. He never posted about it on LinkedIn, never wrote a Medium article, never sat for an interview. But word still traveled. A junior banker at another Horizon branch recognized him weeks later during a vendor expo and whispered, "You're him, right? The one from the boardroom shuffle." Malcolm didn't confirm it. He didn't have to. Respect had become the ripple effect. What he carried that day, his calm, his documents, his dignity, was now part of the institution's quiet reform, and it extended beyond him. Other clients were reporting better service. Other professionals were taking up space they'd once felt boxed out of. Not every battle is loud. Some are won by simply refusing to shrink. Malcolm wasn't trying to be remembered. He was trying to build something that couldn't be ignored. And that's exactly what happened. On the anniversary of Pinnacle Haulage Group's expansion into the Mid-Atlantic, Malcolm Reed sat at a community leadership panel hosted by Horizon West Bank. Not as a guest, as a keynote speaker. His talk wasn't bitter. It wasn't about blame. It was about visibility, about reminding institutions that clients are not checkboxes. They're people, stories, investments, waiting to be met with respect. After his speech, Cassandra Holt took the podium and said, "This story began with a delay. It ended with transformation." Malcolm smiled humbly, stepping away from the mic. Later, a young man approached him, early 20s, nervous. "I almost walked out of my job last week," he said. "But then I remembered what you did. You stayed. You made them see you." Malcolm placed a hand on his shoulder. "Never forget, you don't have to yell to be powerful. You just have to be undeniable." As the event ended, Malcolm walked into the evening with no headlines, no cameras, but the entire bank now carried his echo. And the next time someone like him walks through polished glass doors, the staff won't just smile, they'll stand, because real change doesn't arrive loudly. It arrives prepared and stays long after the doors close. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it walks in quietly, waits patiently, and exposes everything without saying a word. Respect isn't a courtesy, it's a standard. If you ignore someone because of how they look, don't be surprised when you find out they were the person you needed most. And if you've ever been dismissed, don't shrink. Show up, stay ready, let them learn the hard way what real presence looks like.